friends, Michelle here at the intersection of pedagogy and technology, and today's video is about how I have organized myself to do graduate studies effectively to pursue my doctoral degree while at the same time continuing to work full-time for a school jurisdiction and be a mom, a wife, a daughter, and still have some time for myself left over. So my system is deliberate. I had it set up before I began my Ed.D, and I'm going to take you through the pieces of it. There are probably ways that this can be done more quickly or more simply, but my purpose with setting up my system of organization was to ensure that as I go through my readings and highlight and annotate, that I'm also beginning to internalize this. With a doctoral degree, there is a candidacy exam to begin the process of the research, and there's also, of course, a defense of the dissertation out the other side. So today, we're going to take a look at how I've set up my devices. It includes my iPad, and it includes my MacBook. Now, you don't need to be proprietary to Apple for this to work, but in full disclosure, I am using an Apple ecosystem simply because that's the ecosystem I work with. You could set this up in another ecosystem. I can't say for sure if it would work as well on Windows as it does on Mac with the iPad, but it's been really seamless for me. So here goes. So let's start on my iPad. And what I want to look at on my iPad is an app called Goodnotes. And you see it down there in the bottom corner with the little lines and kind of a happy face and a pencil. Goodnotes is the hub of my system. So within my iPad, I have every article that I have read so far for my degree. This is almost 2 years now worth of article collecting and reading. I've got my annotations, I've got my notes, I've got my planning, I've got textbooks in here. And now there has been a couple of textbooks that I had to get in a paper copy or I had to do through Kindle or Kobo or some other reader. But by and large, everything is within my Goodnotes, and you'll see that we are in the doctoral studies portion of my Goodnotes. So you'll note that I've got a number of different folders in here. I've got my course that I'm currently taking. It's got the purple cover here, says Dr. Sumara. That's my professor this term. And then you'll note I've got a few things that are out and about, but I've got folders, I've got methodological articles, so that's from my methodologies courses. And if we go in there, you're going to see that I've got all kinds of articles on specifically relating to methodologies. If we go into summer 2023, that was my summer course this last summer. And you'll note that I've put covers on the majority of my articles. And you may note that I've got a few other notifiers on there as well. I'm going to get to that. It's actually a very easy system to set up and to use. The only challenge that I would suggest exists within this is doing it consistently. But that's with any organization system, isn't it? If you want to be organized, you have to take the measures to organize yourself. So, I am doing my research, as you know from this channel, in the area of AI. So if we go into my folder of AI articles, you will see that I've got different colored covers on the articles. I've got notifications as to how much % of the article I've read. I've got the Z for Zotero. We're going to get to that because I do use Zotero in addition to this. I've got that fancy little typewriter on there. I've got pink covers, I've got brown covers, and I've got yellow covers. And you'll see that there are some other additional notifiers in there as well. But this is going to form the crux of my research. And certainly this folder made up the bulk of my literature review as it sits right now. So my literature review is sitting in a place of probably 70% completed. My course last term was about writing the lit review. Now in an area such as artificial intelligence in K-12, I cannot consider my literature review to be complete until the first stage of completion will be when I do my candidacy exam, hopefully this summer. And then the second, of course, is the completion of the dissertation. But I'm not going to consider that a completed work until it is actually completed. So we're going to call that 70% done. So the pink cover represents artificial intelligence articles, and the yellow represents teacher wellness articles. Those are the two things that I wish to bring together in my research in terms of how can we use AI to improve teacher wellness. So the yellow and the pink are definitely significant. You'll note there's also two styles of color. So the brown with the yellow down the left-hand side is from term 1 of this school year. So that's content that I read in the September to December timeframe. The yellow solid color now represents new stuff that I've brought in this term that I will be reading. My style of memory is very much an associative memory. And so I have done that color separation because I know that there will be a point where I am looking back for something and I will have this feeling of, I know I read that in November because I was in the orthodontist office waiting for my child's orthodontist to do his thing when I was reading it. So that's more a matter of I know who I am as a learner. And so I've structured my organization to help facilitate that type of retrieval. It isn't necessarily a system that would work for everybody, but it is working really well for me because of that associative memory. So this is where I read, I highlight, and I annotate. So if we look across these, you'll see the 100% on some covers. Some covers don't show a percentage at all. Those are ones I have not yet read, but I feel may be important. And so I put them into my file. They may end up being one that I don't read or I don't use, but at the time when I'm looking down one particular vein of research, I will load them in. When they come into this app called Goodnotes, they come in like this Hargraves 1991 article. And it sits there right now without a cover because I've not yet applied a cover to it. There is a process as I bring new content into my Goodnotes app where I add the cover and then I put the author name and year on it in a font that's big enough that I can hopefully read it off my iPad, and then also the name of the article. Does it take me some time to do? Absolutely it does. For me, it's so worth it because I can retrieve what I'm seeking in a fairly quick capacity. But Goodnotes is not the only thing I use. So I want to take a look before I dive into the next phase. Let's look at one that I've gone through and I've highlighted. So there's the cover. You'll see I've also pasted my APA citation on it. If we go back and we look at the others, I don't always have the APA citation on it, but if I know that it's one that's a little bit difficult to cite, or I've had a little bit of difficulty sussing out exactly how to cite it, I will try and grab that citation from somewhere to help me with my APA. APA is something you do get better at as you go, and I definitely can see improvements in my own APA capacity and ability, but it takes time. And so I do try to give myself a leg up when it comes time to actually take all of this reading and all of this annotating and write with it. I don't want to be digging around for little details. When I'm ready to write, I want to write. So we have the cover, and you'll see there are some notations on the cover, and I'm going to talk about those. I've mentioned the percentage read, and so you'll see I've read 100% of this article, so I've read it start to finish. I know that when I look at the bigger picture of what I've got on here. So if we go into an article, you'll note that I use some different colors, and those are meaningful. So yellow is the color that I use to highlight relevant citations. And you can see in Goodnotes that when I've got the highlighter selected, there's lots of colors to choose from, and I can add more colors. The colors are meaningful. Green is a word definition. So when I go to do my academic writing and I'm wanting to define artificial intelligence, I can find those definitions within the cited work, within my highlighted work, to bring forth a robust definition or to stack in my brackets in the citation the number of authors that I've read who have said the same thing on the topic. Carrying on, we get to my pink highlight. That one represents another author. So that may be something that I'm going to want to retrieve later on and read. It felt as I was reading through this article like that might be important, and I may want to look that up later. So I highlight those ones with pink. Blue. Blue represents the methodology. So as I'm reading through this Crompton and Burke article, I will highlight remarks about the methodology using blue. So I'll take the blue highlighter here, and I'm just going to highlight here that it was a systematic review methodology. So that way, if I'm needing to flip through this article later on, just searching for that, it's super quick and easy to just find it within. You will also find in my work that there is a purple highlight. And the purple highlight represents where we have gaps in the literature. So as you are doing graduate studies, it's important to consider where we see some of the gaps in the literature, because that's the purpose of research, is to fill those gaps where we feel like our knowledge is potentially lacking or needing to be filled out a little bit. So I do note the gaps in the literature that other authors have outlined with purple. So you'll see here the final code was a call for more research in AI education. Perfect. I want to be noting that so that as I am writing and as I'm determining what angle I'm going to take on my research, I know where other authors have stated that we need to have further review done. You'll note also that I use the pen tool within, and you'll see I've got a couple exclamation marks here. That is just like taking your pencil and writing on a piece of paper, so I can write my notes. And just like with the highlighter, I can choose different colors. I've not assigned meaning to my ink colors. I've only assigned meaning to my highlight colors. And just like any pencil you would use on a paper, I can erase as well. Part of why I love this system, aside from the fact that I've probably saved a few trees by not printing, is anywhere I go, if I have my iPad with me, I have my schoolwork with me. So if I find myself sitting and waiting at a doctor's office, I can read my literature instead of a People magazine that may be sitting on the table for folks who are waiting. Additionally, I don't have binders and binders and binders of paper that I'm trying to manage. I've got it all at my fingertips, and I'll be the first to say I'm a Gen Xer. Paper and pencil is how I did high school. It's how I did my undergrad. I did a large part of my master's degree in the 2015 era using paper. This time, I'm not using paper. I've only printed off so far my own writing. I haven't printed any of the articles that I've been reading, and I have read hundreds of articles so far. I shudder to think how much shelf space it would take up to have all of my readings done in paper. So this is phase one of a multi-stage process that I'm using to do this degree. And I'm going to tell you I'm having a load of fun doing this degree because I am not finding it stressful. And I give full props to my organization system that I'm not finding this stressful. Now, I mentioned that doing this graduate degree is a marathon, not a sprint. So this is phase two now of my citation organization. One of the things that I learned in my master's degree was that I could read, and I could read, and I could read, and I could highlight, annotate, and I could have all of the ideas. But when it came time to sit down and do the writing, I would realize that, oh, I read this thing, and it was exactly, where did I read that? And by the time I was at the 2-year point in my master's degree, I felt overwhelmed by the amount of reading that I had done and trying to retrieve my citations, which, as I mentioned a moment ago, were also on paper. You can't do a Control F or a Command F on paper, you're going to sit there and you're going to flick through every single page to try and find that thing you were looking for, and it can be arduous. So I decided to spread the arduous out a little bit and try and use it to my advantage. So what I need to do now is I need to set up a Google slide deck where I am going to transcribe the yellow highlights now from my Goodnotes. And yes, I have actually been typing them all out, because what that does is it helps it sink into my own head, so that when I'm speaking at my candidacy exam or when I'm speaking at my dissertation defense, I'm going to have better odds of retrieving the content that I've read and that I've learned, because I'm taking an extra step here to really get it into my head. So I'm going to show you how I set these up, and I'm going to show you a couple that I've completed as well. But I have a new project. I'm doing a literature review for 4 researchers out of U Calgary on the technology, pedagogy, content knowledge framework. And so I need to create a new one of these, and I am actually going to be using this one. So I'm going to show you how I create these. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of these text boxes that are by default, and I'm going to change this to a sheet of paper. Right now it's set to be a television screen or a smartboard screen. I'm just going to go to page setup, and I'm going to make it a sheet of paper so that if I ever did want to print it, I could. More likely what I'll end up doing is exporting it as a PDF and bringing it back into Goodnotes. And I'll show you how big some of these get. But when you go to write, oh my gosh, it is so much easier. So let's do page setup. Let's set it at custom. We're measuring in inches. So a letter sheet is 8.5 wide by 11 high. So there we go. Now it's a sheet of paper. That does make the print smaller on the screen. And as I mentioned, I'm a Gen Xer, so my eyes, I need a little magnification. I do use it on an external monitor where I can get it nice and big. So what I do with these, I'm going to show you my lit review deck for my artificial intelligence. As I read, I highlight, and then I begin to transcribe. And each citation, I file it under a particular topic. So if we look at this, and I'm going to just zoom it in a little bit for you, which is backwards. You'll see I'm shrinking it down, but it's actually getting bigger on the screen in terms of reading it. You can see that I've alphabetized my index here, and they're all hyperlinked. So if I am doing my writing and I want to cite something on the AI of things, because I know I read something about the AI of things, I can click on this, and I can click on the slide number. It is hyperlinked, and that's going to jump me down to my citations about artificial intelligence of things. And you can see that I've got 2 articles that I've read that have cited this. This also helps me to identify overlaps between authors. Along the bottom, I've got my hyperlinks to go back to that original slide that we just left. So I'll click on slide 1, and that's going to take me back to my index. This may sound like a lot of work, but I'm going to go on a limb and say that if you have gone through the process to apply to do a graduate degree, and you are in the process of doing a graduate degree, that you were kind of aware when you did those things that it was going to be a lot of work. What I'm doing with this is I'm offloading the pressure and the stress that I feel when it's time to either write, or that I know I'm going to feel as I'm getting closer to my candidacy. So this particular one, I've left 15 slides at the start of this one to set up my index with. And I did that because adding these links in afterwards to go back to the slides is laborious if you don't set it up front. I learned that the hard way. So I'm going to start with a text box which I'm going to put along the bottom, and I'm going to call it slide 1. And then I put 2 of those upright lines. They're right above the return key on your keyboard. slide 2, slide 3, and I'm just going to lay these out. Now this one won't need as many as I have in this lit review because this is a literature review for dissertation. The literature review that I'm writing for the researchers out of UCalgary is not going to be of the same length and breadth as my dissertation lit review and citations. So I think maybe I'll set up 6 slides though for this, because having to set this up later, it's a bit of a hassle. So let's set up 6 slides. We'll put that along the bottom and we'll hyperlink that in a moment. Okay, so now we've got our numbers ready to go at the bottom of the screen. And where that's helpful is I'm going to just duplicate this. And now every slide is going to have those on. But before we go crazy duplicating, let's put a title up at the top as well so that that stays consistent across the slides. So I'm just going to give it the title of what exactly it is that I'm going to be doing this on. And then let's give that a bit of a bold font so that we can read it when we have it on a different setting. So if we go back to my literature review here and I change it over to the grid view, you can see the titles and they're legible, and even if I shrink down my resolution, they're still easy. Let's zoom it out a little bit and you can still read them because I picked a larger font that's actually visible on a smaller one. Now you may have noticed, and it just shrunk away, we'll bring that back. There's 430 slides in my dissertation lit review as of this point in time. Am I going to use all of these citations? No. But I can find what I'm looking for because of the Command F feature and because of the index that I've laid out at the very beginning. So we're going to do the same thing for this new TPAC setup. So I've got my title now, and this is going to be one of my index pages. I'm going to need to have 6 slides for this beginning part. So let's just make those to start off with. So we're going to duplicate it. And I'm actually going to duplicate it to 7 so that I have my first slide for when I begin to transcribe the content that I've read on TPAC. So there's 6 and there's 7. Now I wanted that 7th one because this is only going to take up 6 slides and I have to be a little bit particular as I hyperlink these. So we're going to do it from slide 7. Let's highlight this. Let's come up here and let's do a link, and I'm going to write slide 1, and I'm going to link that to slide 1. I'm going to do the same thing for slide 2. Okay, now I am actually going to take this, now that they're linked, and I'm going to copy it. I'm just going to do a quick Control C, or if you're on a Mac like I am, it's Command C. And I'm going to come across, and I'm actually going to take these out, and I'm going to replace them with the hyperlinked one. This is the only time I'm going to need to do this, but it ensures that going forward that those links go to the right place. What I have found when I set these up on slides 1 through 6 in this example, one of them will glitch. So I went to slide 7 to do this, and now I should be able to, if I click on this one, I go to slide 4, let's just highlight them, make sure, slide 3, slide 2, slide 1, slide 5, slide 6. And so there sits the quick jump back to get you back to the index of your slide deck. Okay, so I have my slides laid out now where I'm going to put my transcriptions. And I want to take a look now in my folder in Goodnotes that's got the research articles on TPAC. So we're going to go in there, and you can see I'm just getting this started. Hence, I'm doing the video right now because this actually is a system that I'm going to be putting into place for this literature review. So you can see I've selected a color for the covers of these articles. I've selected a blue for this particular folder. And sometimes I reuse the system a little bit, and sometimes I go with something totally new. So this one's totally new. So I'm going to use the blue covers for the TPAC related articles that I'm reading. As I go through the process of reading, I may determine that I need to set up another color of cover to represent something else. At this point in time, I don't know what that might be. So I'm just going with the blue cover. So I've got two of them that have the cover on, and then I've got the handbook. So we're going to add the cover to the handbook right now. So I'm going to open it up, and I'm going to go to the very first page, which is the commercial cover. And I'm going to add a cover to the outside that matches my system. So I'm going to hit this little plus button here, and I want to add a page before, and I'm going to go into more from templates because I want the cover templates. So I'm going to choose cover here. It's the bright colored cover that I want, and then I just want to change the color from yellow to the blue color that matches the other ones. So I'm going to apply that, and now I have a cover that matches the other ones. From there, I need to put the title on the cover. So I'm going to open that back up again. And in the title of the book, I've got the information. I'm very deliberate in how I name my files as I download them. So that's also part of my system here. So I want to select it all, and I'm going to copy that, and then I'm going to come down, I'm going to take the text tool, and I'm going to paste it. And I only want that first part for the name of the author, so we'll just copy that, we'll remove that. So Herring et al. 2016, and then I want the name of the article. Now I'm going to want to make this a little bigger so that on the thumbnail view I can read it. So let's just make that a little bit bigger, and I don't like the red font, so I'm going to change that to black. I could probably go into the default settings and permanently change that. It just hasn't been a priority for me, but I'm sure I probably could change the default color on the font. Herring et al. 2016, let's make that bigger. We'll widen out the text box. That should be visible, and we'll make that black as well. Now when we go back, we see the covers, and I can read that one. Obviously on the second one, I need to put the author and the date, and over time, this is going to fill in with more articles. When I name my files, it's always the main author. If there's multiple authors, main author et al., I follow the same rules that we have for APA 7. If there's just two authors, I name them both on the cover. If there's more than two, I go with the et al. And then the date in brackets. And so what that does, if we go into one of my other ones, is you'll see that it's alphabetical by author. Covers have a color that represents something. And then there's those stickers on the outer part of the cover where I've applied them to give myself further information about what I'm looking at. There's a point of saturation with your brain where you've read so much stuff that it becomes very difficult to retrieve, where did I read that, where did I find that, and this is all a system to help you with retrieval. So now we've got our slides set up. We've got our folder set up in Goodnotes. I've read 100% of the Suresh article, and so we're going to start transcribing that. So here's the article, and I'm going to go in and we're going to look for my first highlighting. So the first highlighted statement on here reads, "These technological advancements perhaps helped in flipping the role of teacher from the curriculum designer to the content delivery facilitator who chooses an appropriate technology along with the pedagogy to do that." Now that is citing somebody else, and so potentially I may want to pull that article. I'm not going to highlight it quite yet though, because I'm not certain that that article is relevant to what I'm working with right here. But I'm going to show you how I do handle that, because I do have a way to handle that as well. So I need to determine what category I would be putting this particular citation in. So it's talking about technological advances. It's talking about flipping the role of the teacher from curriculum designer to content delivery facilitator. I feel like role of the teacher is probably a good place to start. I can always move this if as I'm reading I realize, oh, broader picture, that relates to fill in the blank of unknown thing I haven't read yet. So this is flexible to move and to adjust as you need it to do that. So let's call this role of the teacher. So that's going to be my first item on my index. Now I like a 2-columned index because it uses the space a little more efficiently. So I'm going to use up about half of the slide right now. And I'm going to put a role of the teacher. And then my first slide, which is slide 7, we're going to call that role of the teacher. And then I'm going to transcribe that citation onto this slide. So let's do that. Okay, now is the point where we are going to tackle how we handle when someone else was cited. There's a couple ways to do this. I have a tendency to abbreviate. So I go CROO, which means citing research of others. And I'm even going to make myself a little note over here. I do this often. CROO equals citing. That way I know if I go to use this particular citation, I know that I need to go back into the article and determine, did I read the relevant article that was being cited, or have I not yet? And if I'm going to cite that, I should probably read that article. But I don't need to decide today that I should read that article. It's not highlighted pink. I haven't determined when I read the article that I needed to read this other one. When I highlight in pink, that's a note to myself that I need to read this other article. CROO means if I'm going to use the citation, I should go back into the article itself. From there, I am going to then put it at Suresh, 2023, page 2. Okay, and I'm done. I'm going to go through the entire article and I'm going to do this. And I actually am, because I'm using this demonstration that I'm doing for both my dissertation and the literature review that I'm helping out with for the University of Calgary. So the next one on this article, we'll do one more. Teachers dealing with the learners of this century need to be skilled in integrating technology with the classroom activities, as the appropriate use of technology has proven to enhance learning environments. So that's appropriate use of technology and integrating technology. So let's go back, and I could phrase this a number of ways. I have to think to myself, okay, if I was looking for this citation 3 months from now, what might I call it? So I need to, again, it's know myself as a learner, know myself as a reader, know myself as a student. And I think that what I would probably look up would be technological integration. So alphabetically, that's going to come after role of the teacher. And role of the teacher is slide 7. So I'm going to highlight this. And I'm going to link it to slide 7. And now I have a hyperlinked index beginning to emerge. So now let's go and let's duplicate this slide. And I probably don't need to have this on here again. Maybe I want to take this and move it up to my first slide. So let's copy that with a quick Command C or Control C. And let's paste that there. So I'm going to leave it in the 2 places. I'm going to leave it on my first slide, because when I open this up 2, 3, 4, 6 months from now, as I'm preparing for candidacy or as I'm preparing for defense, I remember then what I meant by that CROO. I actually did trip myself up with that in my first couple months in this particular degree program. So I've learned to really leave myself some signposts along the way, so that when I return to it and my brain is saturated with what I'm thinking and what I'm piecing together about the research, the details become really secondary to the content here. So we've got now two, role of the teacher and role of the teacher. We're going to make the second one now because it follows after role of the teacher, technological integration. And I'll leave the author there in brackets because it happens to be there, convenient, and I'm going to transcribe the next citation. Okay, and this one is not the author citing someone else's work, so I don't need to put any additional information there. That's just a straight citation right out of this article, ready for me to use. So now I can click on my little hyperlink here at the bottom, slide 1. I can double check over here that this is in fact slide 8 for that one. So let's go back to slide 1 and let's link it. So technological integration now is going to link to slide 8. And that is now hyperlinked. So now I can start jumping around in the pieces of the literature that have spoken to me as I'm reading them. This is not the end of my system, but this is the main piece. And this system has been such a gift to me when I go to do the actual writing, that I can start to search and find what I'm looking for. So let's jump over to one of the bigger ones that I've created for my degree, and let's just take a look at how we can use the find tool. So let's put this back on the typical view here. And let's go up to slide 1. Let's go back to the film strip layout where I've got the pages down the left-hand side. Now you'll recall I set this up to be the same size as a sheet of paper. And so that means if I wanted to print this and put this in a binder, I totally could. It won't distort. It is exactly a sheet of paper. So now let's try and find something in this 430 page document of citations. Now I do want to point out that 430 pages doesn't mean 430 full pages. You'll find things like on accuracy, I've only got one citation on there right now, and it even happens to be one where I have a question about the citation that I may want to go back and look at later. And you can see that that's from September. I'm recording this now in February. That is so helpful to me to be able to look and see that, oh yeah, that's a good question. I do want to look further into that. Or if I start looking at accuracy as part of my dissertation, that's a reminder to myself of something that I was thinking at the time when the reading was still fresh in my mind. So every time I've read 3 or 4 articles, I sit down and do a transcription. And then I resume reading. And when I say 3 or 4 articles, that's my target. Sometimes I don't get a chance to sit and transcribe until I've read more. Or maybe life just presented a situation where I was waiting for a meeting to start at work. A couple people were running late due to circumstances beyond their control. And so while I'm sitting there, instead of playing around on social media, which I do enjoy doing, I'll read an article instead. Another thing I want to mention, as I've been doing this demonstration, my wrists on my iPad, which is just down here on the table, they've bumped it a couple times. I don't typically have my iPad set up like that. When I'm transcribing, I generally have my iPad tilted and propped right beside me as if it's another monitor screen. And so I'll have the article sitting beside me and I'll just transcribe off this. So that makes it so that I don't bump it. So as I've had those couple little errors, it's actually just because I'm trying to be as smooth as I can be in creating this video for you. So let's find something. So I'm going to use the Control F or Command F for my document. And what I would like to find within this document is instances of TPACK, because it actually is a framework that I'm going to use to bring my dissertation together. So you'll see that in the 430 slides, I have 37 instances where TPACK has been cited. So let's just start kicking through. Okay, so it's there in my index, which I would totally expect. So there's the first 3 of them were in there. Now I can start looking through at where I have found TPACK referenced in the AI articles that I've read. So I have a couple other reasons why I want to separate that. One being that I'm doing that literature review for those researchers at UCalgary. Another being that it's a framework that I can foresee using down the road for maybe some postdoc research. I'm not sure where I'm going after I complete this degree. I may stay in the job that I currently work, or I may consider some other opportunities. I don't know yet, but I suspect that having TPAC existing as its own little category of, its own subcategory of research within my system might be of value to me down the road. Additionally, this one is starting to become pretty slow at 430 slides. In terms of file size, it's really not that big, but for Google Slides, it's getting to be fairly big. I do download it from time to time as a PowerPoint document and back it up that way, because PowerPoint's also searchable. So if I end up overloading Google Slides, I don't know if that's possible, but I don't know that that's not possible. So I'm hedging my bets a little bit when I do that. But once in a while, I'll come over here and I'll do the file download. And there's a number of formats. So I'll download it as PowerPoint, and then I'll also download it as a PDF. And that way I'm really covered in terms of backing it up. So let's just back it up as a PDF right now. That's going into my downloads. So if something happened, if I crash this out, if I mess this up in ways that I can't foresee today, and you can see it's just a tiny little file. It's only 2.3 megabytes. That's nothing. But it's not typical to have a Google slide deck size to be a piece of paper and 430 pages of it. But it's really efficient for what I'm trying to do. Now I want to talk about those stickers that I utilize on the covers of my articles, because they are meaningful. And so you can see on the screen in front of me, or in front of you as the case may be, that I've got the folder open that contains my stickers. And I don't have tons of them, but each one is significant, and some of them are pretty obvious. Like you can see that I've got a maple leaf that I put on the cover of ones that are Canadian studies, because that's my country. And Alberta, obviously, if I'm attending University of Calgary, that's in the province of Alberta. So those denote where the study was. Now, I might add some more to this somewhere down the road. So for instance, if I were to discover as I read that a lot of the studies are coming out of Australia, I might find then an image to represent Australia. And that could be anything. It doesn't matter if it's meaningful to anybody else. It matters if it's meaningful to me. So it could be the flag of Australia, or it could be an image of the country of Australia, or I might pick a koala bear. It doesn't really matter as long as I understand what it means. Then I've got this other folder. There's 10 stickers in there, starting at 10% and going all the way to 100. So when I read an article, sometimes I don't read the whole thing. Sometimes I don't read all of the methodologies part in the middle. That'll be there if I need to go back to that article. I can read that later. So sometimes I'm doing a bit of an estimate of, okay, I read the intro and the purpose. I glanced at the methodologies, and then I read the conclusion and the discussions. So I've read, and I'll look at it in Goodnotes and see that, okay, I've read about 60% of it. And so I'll apply the 60% number to the cover, because then when I return to it somewhere down the road, I know that I've read it and I've read more than half of it, and that gives me some idea as to how much value I found within it at the time I read it. That's also subject to change. Something that I only read to a 40 or 50% right now. As I get closer to candidacy and I'm writing and I'm realizing, oh, I thought that wasn't so important previously, but now I can see that it's actually really important, then I might return to that. So I've got my percentage red stickers, and then I've got my other stickers that mean different things. So I want to show you how I apply those on my iPad. First of all, I've got them stored in Dropbox. There are lots of cloud utilities out there. Google Drive would work. Dropbox is just, for a number of years, it's been my go-to. So I'm using Dropbox, but you can use whatever works for you. So on my iPad, what I do is I go to a split screen, and then I open Dropbox on the split. And you can see that I even have it on the folder that has the stickers, because I've simply accessed it so much that it's the last thing I accessed. So we're going to pretend that I've read all of this Adams article that's sitting here with the nice pink cover. So I'm going to open that up and it opens to the cover. So we're going to go into the percentage read. We're going to pretend I've read the whole thing. So I'm going to tap on the 100 and I'm going to drag it over. And you can see that these are just PNG files. They're nothing fancy. JPEGs would work too. So whatever kind of suits you, it's going to work. If it's your system, it's going to work for you. Now let's add to this. Let's imagine that this was a Canadian study. Maybe it is. I don't know because I haven't actually read it yet. So I'm going to have to remember to remove these stickers. So I'm going to drag this over. And now my maple leaf is applied to the cover of that. So that gives me that at a glance as I'm scrolling through. And I've just lost those. So let's go back into the ed.d folder and into the stickers. And let's imagine that it's also got to do with TPAC. So let's put that sticker on there. So now when I go back to full screen and we look at my thumbnails, now we can see that there's 100% red on that. It's a Canadian article and it references TPAC. So that's my little sticker system. I kind of developed that on the fly as I realized that the number of articles in my Goodnotes was getting to be a lot. I've developed some of these pieces over time based off experience and based off the need to be able to just sit down and write. Because when I take time away from my family to work on my degree, I want that time away from my family to be productive. And honestly, I want it to be at a minimum. I don't want my child growing up with my nose in articles and on my computer screen all the time. I want to be present for my family, and this system has really helped me to facilitate all aspects of my life in a way that I am comfortable with. Now I want to talk about how I get the articles into Goodnotes. So I'm using a MacBook. And Goodnotes works really seamlessly on a MacBook. I'm not certain it works as good on a Windows computer, and I'm relatively certain that it really doesn't work so well on Chromebooks at all. But I'm going to show you how I get the articles in on the iPad only. You don't need to have a MacBook to be able to use this effectively. You can bring the articles in just on the iPad. But if you are running a MacBook, it's pretty slick to be bringing them in through the MacBook as well. So I'm going to show you how to do it on the MacBook, and I'm going to show you how to do it on the iPad. So I've got my downloads folder, and in it I have a number of TPAC articles ready to go. The only one that is really ready for me to load into my Goodnotes is the one that I've renamed, that's got the author's names first, followed by the year, because that's going to put it in alphabetical order by author last name for me. It's another one of those upfront investments so that when the time comes and the pressure crunch is on, I've done the little details. So all I'm going to do to get that into my TPAC folders, I'm going to open the TPAC folder and I'm going to drag this over onto this screen and it's going to load in. I've got it set so that it syncs through iCloud. So iCloud and backup is here. And I've got iCloud enabled. I've also got that enabled on my iPad. And so that allows me to have it sync through the cloud. And it's quite effective. A few months ago, it wasn't doing the syncing quite so quickly. And what I learned was to open these, just like I've got done right now, and turn them off. And then turn them back on, and that forces it to do a sync. So if you find that you loaded something in and it's just not showing up on the opposite device, you can go into that cloud setting and just turn them on and off, and it'll force the sync. So now on my iPad, if we go in, you can see that I've got that same article, the Hofer, and I'm not sure how to pronounce the other last name, but it's in my iPad now. So we've brought one in through the MacBook. Now let's look on the iPad and see how we can do the same thing, but on the iPad, bypassing the need for a computer. So I'm in my TPAC folder here on my iPad. I'm going to tap on the plus by new and I'm going to import. And that gives me some choices as to where I'm going to import from. And so I could import, if I had it on my iPad, I could import it that way. If I had it in my iCloud drive, I could import that way. I haven't found the iCloud drive to be terribly effective. And as I mentioned before, Dropbox is kind of my go-to. I know you can also have Google Drive on here and you can bring things in that way. So let's just go into my EdD here and we're just going to grab a document and we'll open that. That actually happens to be an image document, but I could do it with a PDF or anything else that happened to be there. And now when we go and we look at my thumbnails, that happens to be just a JPEG. Obviously I can bring those in as well, but now that's on this screen. And if we do it, if we force it again to do that real quick backup and sync, we'll have that up on the computer screen as well. So let's just turn that off. And let's just turn that right back on and you can see it's already forced it to sync. And so there's that image that we just imported from Dropbox. So we can go new, import, and let's go back into Dropbox and let's see if we can grab perhaps a PDF file. And so that's bringing in a PDF. It's not on TPAC. It is on Growth Mindset, but that just came out of my Dropbox. And Dropbox will work on a Chromebook. It'll work on a Windows computer. Obviously, it works on a MacBook. So you don't need to have a MacBook to make this work, but it is kind of a slick system if you happen to have that at your disposal. If you don't, it's still a super strong organization system. And I am so confident that it will benefit you in your academic pursuits as much as it has benefited me. And now we see how quickly it syncs without me forcing it to do that sync. So now if those were real articles, and the Hofer one actually is, I would add a cover onto it, which I'm going to do right now. We've already done this once in this video, but we're going to do it one more time just because organizing is so important, and this is how I stay on top of all of the things. The next piece of my organization system is Zotero. And I know that in Zotero, I could be doing the highlighting and I could be doing the annotating that I am doing in Goodnotes. I am aware that Zotero offers that. I haven't always found these citation managers to be entirely reliable. I gave Mendeley a try when I did my master's degree. I did find it through the university library, there were sometimes buttons that would allow something to be sent directly to Mendeley. But sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. I took a look at it again in 2022 when I began this degree, and I didn't find it to be a whole lot better than it had been in the 2015 to 2017 era. But the other thing that factored in was the fact that my supervisor uses Zotero. And so for the purposes of being kind of on the same framework and the same network as my supervisor, I elected to use Zotero. It has also glitched at different times and inconvenient times. And so I was grateful that it wasn't the only thing that I was relying on. When I was on campus in the summertime, I had done an operating system update on my computer, and then the syncing to Zotero in the cloud was glitchy. And so I was really glad that I was using this for my highlighting and annotating. And really all I use Zotero for is retrieving my citation. So if I am using this Ang article, I'll do the right click, create bibliography from item, and you can see any of the formatting. I've got mine on APA 7 because that's what UCalgary requires for me. Copy to clipboard, and I'll copy that, and then I can paste that in my reference section. I still need to go through and I need to double check all of the APA in those, but at least it gives me that basis around which I can format the text, the punctuation, and some of the little details. So that's where I use Zotero. That's really how I've limited my usage of Zotero to that. And I know it can do much, much more. For my system, I'm not utilizing it in those capacities. So that's my three-pronged system. I read in Goodnotes, highlight and annotate. I then transcribe from this into a Google slide deck where I can find, and I do that again, just to reiterate what I said before, I do that to try to get the information really well stuck in my brain so that when I'm conversing at my candidacy exam, when I'm presenting this content at teachers' conventions, that I know in my head what the facts were, that I can retrieve that ChatGPT was trained on 178 billion pieces of data. That number sticks in my head because I've transcribed it a few times when I've been going through the process of taking it out of Goodnotes and into Google Slides. So it's a system that I've put in place almost 2 years ago. I've been very, very happy with it, and I don't feel nearly the sense of overwhelm at this stage of my doctoral degree that I did at this same stage in my master's degree. When I was in my master's degree, I had citations typed out in Google Docs, but then I had to go down and I had to read every single citation to find the correct one. And I really felt like I needed a system where I could retrieve it and set up an index. And that compelled my choice to move out of Docs and into Slides because I really wanted to be able to hyperlink this. So I happen to know on this deck that slide 8 takes me to the area that's all the teacher content. So teacher ego, teacher leadership, teacher professional development, teacher reluctance, teacher burnout, teacher support, all of those teacher topics that I've labeled in my index. So there's no right way or wrong way to do this. I've taken a piece of software that's intended for other things and I've bent it to work for my particular need, which is organization for my doctoral degree so that I can be a good full-time employee. I can continue to be a wife, a mom. I hope I'm good at those things. I know I'm a good employee. I can still be part of my family and still have a life while genuinely preparing myself, my brain, my stress, my anxiety, my excitement, my eagerness, my interest towards my degree. So it's worked for me. It may or may not work for you, but maybe you got a couple ideas from challenges that I've faced in the past, challenges I faced with this degree, and challenges I face on an ongoing basis trying to fit it all in, because the great equalizer is 24 hours in a day. We all get 24. None of us can get a 25th or a 26th. So I need to fit it in, and I don't want to pay tuition forever. So I'm pacing myself to try to meet the deadline as efficiently as I can while still being realistic, knowing myself as a learner, and using my knowledge of educational technology to provide myself with the best possible ed tech that I can. I'm going to sign off now because I have some reading to do. But I hope that maybe you found some nuggets of wisdom in this video. I hope it was worth your time, and I look forward to chatting with you another day. Thanks for watching.